Hey everyone, Pink Apple here, and I'm super excited to say that we ended the first ever ranked season in the #1 spot, with over 4,000 points. Today, I'll be sharing my thoughts on all of the cards within the Duke of Crows deck, letting you know what cards I prioritize picking up and why. Before we get into the rankings, I just want to point out that literally every single card in the Duke of Crows deck has a combo attached to it. And this means that the strength of each card can vary a lot depending on the context of your deck. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into the S tier with our first card, Black Feather Knave. This is one of the most underrated cards in the entire game, and it blows my mind how often my opponents willingly hand this card over to me. If you watch my Grandmaster Halalu tier list, you would know how highly I think of the Oathman Agent, being able to give 2 gold every turn he survives, as well as providing great combo potential. Black Feather Knave shares these exact same strengths, except it enables purple cards instead, which makes for far more impactful combos. Your opponent has to kill this card every time it's played, and if they can't, you'll just snowball out of control. The additional 2 gold every turn ensures that you can always buy cards like Plunder or Squawking Oratory. On top of the insane economy this card provides, it's also going to serve as a trigger for your other early game Crow cards, like Scratch or Toll of Flesh. When you pick up Black Feather Knave in the first few turns, the card's effectively making your opponent start the game with -10 prestige, since they have to keep putting the 2 power into this card over and over. Effectively, this is going to slow down the match by a couple of turns, which is exactly what we need with Duke of Crows. Because if we can survive to the late game, no other deck can keep up with our massive combos. Overall, this is an amazing card. If I could start the game with any Crow card of my choice, hands down, it would always be Black Feather Knave. Next up, we have, in my opinion, the only card managing to contest Black Feather Knave for the top spot, in Plunder. You can think of card draw as the primary fuel the Duke of Crows deck runs on, and no card gives as much of it as Plunder. Being able to draw 3 additional cards is immensely powerful, and you can achieve this effect super consistently come late game. Toss in 1 or 2 other sources of card draw, and Plunder can start enabling you to play your entire deck in 1 turn. So the consistency this card is adding to your late game combos is clearly absurd. But surprisingly, the card manages to perform pretty decently in the early game as well. If you manage to combo Plunder with just your purple starter card, it's effectively giving you 2 gold on play. And if you picked up just 1 other Crow card, like Toll of Flesh or Scratch, the value you'll be getting when these cards connect is almost impossible to keep up with. Without a doubt, Plunder is a clear contender for the best card in the entire deck, with its only weakness being if the card doesn't combo, it's like you never added the card to your deck in the first place. And now, for the final 2 cards to make it into our S tier today, we have Toll of Flesh, as well as its upgrade, Toll of Silver. These cards are going to be your most consistent early game pickups, and make for one of the most optimal turn 1 openers you can have with the Duke of Crows deck. So we're getting 2 gold on play here, just like Black Feather Knave. And while these cards don't have the staying power that Knave does, we only need to combo them with 1 card to get an additional draw. This makes these cards play great in the early game, while also making those 3 to 6 card combos really easy to pull off in the mid to late game. The other really nice thing about Toll of Flesh is that since the card sits at a relatively cheap 4 gold cost, pretty early on in the game, you can start to use the treasury the same turn you buy this card. This is really rapidly going to start ramping up your economy, and can even be done on turn 1 if you happen to start off with 6 gold as player 2. As for the upgrade, Toll of Silver adds 1 additional coin if we manage to get a combo 3 off. And this definitely makes the card a bit better, but the main strength of these 2 cards is their early game consistency. And because of that, I consider both of these cards to be S tier. Alright, now heading into the A tier, we're starting off super strong with Squawking Oratory. This card almost made it into the S tier, but in the end, I felt the card just slightly lack the level of consistency the rest of the S tier cards have. Squawking Oratory is quite a bit worse in the early game than any of the cards we've reviewed so far. And this is because you really need to get its 3-part combo off before the card starts seeing any value. However, it's the card's 4-part combo for 4 power that turns it into one of the best late game cards the deck has to offer. This card serves as a potential win condition for your Duke of Crows deck, and having 2 of these adds 8 power to every late game combo. Once I have enough Crow cards to be reliably triggering the combo 4 effect, I consider Squawking Oratory to be my highest priority pickup, even over cards like Plunder or Knave. The main identity of Crow decks is their massive finishing turn combos, being able to pull out 20 to 40 prestige in just 1 turn. This card is going to help enable those finishing combos better than any other card besides Plunder, while also serving as a way to consistently gain power in a deck typically lacking that strength. If you were forced to use an early Crow patron power, or if the enemy managed to recover after a finishing blow somehow, Squawking Oratory is one of the 2 cards in the deck that can keep you from fizzling out. Overall, depending on the game state, this card ranges from the best card in the entire deck to a pretty mediocre early game pickup. It's immensely powerful in the late game, but the inconsistency the card has until you get to that point keeps it ever so slightly out of the S tier in my opinion. Now placing right behind Squawking Oratory in our A tier, we have Murder of Crows. You may have noticed I said there are 2 cards that can prevent your Crow deck from fizzling out, and Murder of Crows is that second option. But only comboing 3 cards this time, once again we're getting a huge total of 4 power. If you manage to land this combo a couple of times here or there throughout the match, you really won't find yourself that far behind your opponents who are playing more aggressive decks. And every time you do land the combo, this card is giving you as much gold as you would get from playing luxury exports. So what keeps this card from being an S tier card? Firstly, this is one of the only cards in the deck that actually has no card draw attached to it. And this means a lot of the times, drawing this card can be the end of your combo. And secondly, if this combos with nothing at all, the card is just a gold coin. These downsides in mind, the card is still strong enough late game to be a method of hitting 40 prestige on its own, while also having the potential to just flat out nearly win your game on turn 3 if you're lucky enough to draw it with your purple starter card. What Murder of Crows lacks in consistency, it makes up for in sheer strength. Moving on to our final A tier card today, we have Pilfer. This is the unupgraded base version of Plunder, and is losing out on the 4-part combo for 1 additional card. This really brings the card's late game potency down quite a bit, but Pilfer still retains Plunder's early game consistency and exceptional mid game value. The card doesn't stand out as much as any of the other cards we've gone over already, but it's a consistently decent card that keeps your mid game combos going. Overall, I would say Pilfer is a pretty low A tier card, but definitely more consistent than the cards we'll be going over in the B and C tiers. Starting out our B tier this time around, we have Scratch. This is our non-upgraded Murder of Crows, which loses the 3-part combo, but in exchange becomes 1 gold cheaper. Scratch maintains the ability to get a lucky combo off on turn 3 and completely change the course of the match. But it loses a lot of the late game power Murder of Crows had to offer. I'm not typically a huge fan of cards with hit or miss power levels, but I do like that the very low 3 gold cost here often means you can pick this up alongside using the treasury, which softens the gambling aspect quite a bit. In the end, losing half the power potential that Murder of Crows has leaves Scratch in a much worse spot come late game. But this card is pretty easy to pick up early on and can still snowball the match from turn 3 onward. It's not a bad pickup, but if you have the gold, you may want to consider a more consistent option. Now for our next card in the B tier, we have Pool of Shadow. This is one of the more overrated cards in the deck, and I often see players over-prioritizing this card in the early game. The Duke of Crows deck wants to get to the late game, where it can set up these massive combos. And the way we manage to do that is by building up our economy early on. If you fail to connect the combo, Pool of Shadows is actively hindering that game plan. And the small power gains early on are not that relevant in such an explosive late game deck. The card draw combo is great and automatically pairs nicely with any other purple cards, but up until the second half of the match, the 2 gold that we're getting from Toll of Flesh is just far better than the 2 power that we're getting here. While the card can hinder your early game economy, there's 2 factors making Pool of Shadows still a pretty decent card. Firstly, in the late game, when you can manage to activate the 4 card combo, you're getting a massive 3 gold on top. This effectively turns Pool of Shadow into Scratch with a card draw combo. And secondly, if your match happens to have the Red Eagle deck in it, the 2 power that you get on play here allows you to draw a card with the Black Patron power, regardless of whether or not you landed any combos. This can artificially start combo chains that you would have otherwise missed, and makes the card much more consistent. In the end, while you should always be picking up Toll of Flesh over this card in the early game, Pool of Shadow eventually will become the more potent card as the game grows longer and you add more crow cards to your deck. Finishing off our B tier, we have the only purple contract action in Law of the Sovereign Roost. This card is a twice as expensive Harvest Season that forces your opponent to discard a card if you can trigger its 3-part combo. I see most players buying this card too frequently, and I don't think the community quite realizes how useless forcing their opponent to discard a card typically is. Since you get to pick which card is discarded, unless you're forcing at least 2 to 3 discards, the opponent's game plan won't be severely hindered by this effect. The best use for this contract action, and the only real reason you want to be picking this card up, is if you can use it to trigger your combo chains, or prevent your enemy from using it to trigger theirs. In some cases, this contract action is going to start a big combo and have S tier levels of impact, but most of the time, you're better off investing in your deck. And now finally moving down to the C tier, we have both of the purple agents. Both of these cards give 1 coin on play, and you need to land a 3-part combo to trigger their bonus effects. The Black Feather Knight combo is going to give 2 extra coins and 2 power, essentially acting as the agent version of Scratch. Black Feather Brigands combo, on the other hand, simply draws a card. Typically, I like the draw card effect a bit more, but what gives Black Feather Knight the edge over the Brigand is the extra point of health. 3 health can be a bit difficult for your opponent to deal with, especially in the early game. And I think the best aspect of these cards is that if they survive, they serve as combo starters for your next turn. And Black Feather Knight just manages to pull that off a bit more consistently. Overall, these cards are really expensive for what they provide, but adding any purple card to your Crow deck tends to be an improvement. And that about wraps it up for the Duke of Crows tier list. I know this was definitely a bit of a longer one, but these cards are a lot more contextual than the cards we've gone over in the previous tier list. If you have any questions about the cards still, or disagree with any of my placements, let me know in the comment section down below. I'll be trying to respond to each and every one of you. For our next video, we'll be taking a break from the tier lists and moving into our first advanced technique overview. As always, if you found this insight helpful, please leave a like, and subscribe to keep up to date with the rest of the guides coming out soon. Until next time, and may the Divines bless your taverns with turn 1 Black Feather Knaves.